you don't want to have to clean up the product. You want to buy something where, by and large, you have a best-selling product. You just need to fix the rest of the business.
You're listening to Customer Growth Sessions, presented by Intergrowth, where we talk through strategies to help up-and-coming e-commerce businesses bring in more customers. I'm your host, Pat Ahern. Let's jump in. All right, listeners, welcome back to the latest episode of Customer Growth Sessions. Today, I'm thrilled to have on Mira Nair, the CEO and owner over at AZARIA. Mira, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Pat.
I'm so excited to jump into this. Can you start out by giving us an overview of what AZARIA is and what you guys do over there?
Absolutely. We are a luxury vegan leather and leather handbag brand. The brand was born out of a need for a chic diaper bag. And that diaper bag did so well that they launched into several other different silhouettes. And now it's a full-blown destination for handbags, cosmetic bags, diaper bags, bags to take you from before motherhood, through motherhood, and into after motherhood as well. And I purchased the brand last October from its original founder through an acquisition and have been running it as the owner and CEO since.
I love it. And I am so excited to pick your brain on the acquisition from the acquirer's lens today. So I'd love to start out there. First, let's say maybe it was like last summer. Talk to us about the process of going about finding a brand to acquire that obviously eventually ended up becoming AZARIA. But how did you start out with the process of trying to find a brand to acquire?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I spent about 17 years in corporate fashion, and I'd always known that I'd sort of wanted to go and do my own thing, but I was very acutely aware that it's hard to start a brand from the ground up. You know, I'd heard of the idea of buying a brand, and I think when I had initially heard about it, it felt overwhelming, right? Thought maybe I need a stockpile of cash, or maybe I need a relationship with that specific person to be able to broker a deal to acquire a brand. But I realized that there are actually websites and companies out there that broker this transaction for you. And so the specific one that I was looking at was called Quiet Light. And they have a great sort of robust catalog of brand buying and selling companies. And I was really looking at specifically e-commerce retail brands, either apparel, accessories, handbags, footwear, things of that nature. And my expertise is really on the direct-to-consumer side. And so I was able to really narrow down the criteria for what I was looking for in purchasing a brand. And the way that it works with a lot of these websites, and I'll speak to Quiet Light specifically, is that you show interest in a company that's on sale, and then they put you in touch with a broker that represents both the seller and the buyer. And then you talk through the details of the brand itself, how it came to be, the numbers. You walk through the fine details of the P&L and decide whether it's the right fit for you as the buyer and them as the seller. And then you figure out the big question is, can you afford it? And what means are there? What avenues are there to take to be able to purchase a brand? And then you hope that you're the best, highest bidder. And then you go through the process. I personally used what is called a Rob's rollover process. And what it does is allows you to use some of your 401k funds, all or some of your 401k funds, tax-free in the pursuit of acquiring a business. And so when I was looking passively and when I found out that was an option is when it became sort of more real for me, right? If I can use some of these 401k funds that are really sitting there and collecting dust to my benefit in the pursuit of this next chapter in my professional career, then how great would that be? And so that was the beginning of the acquisition.
Mira, that was like maybe the most comprehensive answer and helpful answer I've ever gotten to a question I've asked on this podcast. That was amazing.
Great.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing all that, first of all.
Yes.
I want to pick your brain a little bit more on some of the details you shared there. You mentioned you found a marketplace that really helped you to find AZARIA.
Yeah.
And if I understood correctly, it sounds like really step one was you started to find the brand and then you were matched with a broker that really worked in your best interest and the interest of the seller to find a mutually beneficial arrangement. On your end, how much due diligence went into the process, let's say before you reached out to the broker specifically for AZARIA? Was it a case where you found, I don't know, 10 business opportunities, let's say, you looked at it and said, okay, this is in the e-commerce and fashion space. It's this range of revenue. Let me reach out to these
Yeah.
businesses. I want to cast a wide net and see what happens from there. Or did you go much more laser focused with the process?
Yeah, I was pretty laser focused. I mean, I'll give you some background on me. I'm actually quite risk averse when it comes to the way I manage my finances. And so if I was going to take this leap of faith, it needed to be a very measured leap of faith. I needed to know that I had the expertise in this world to buy that kind of brand and scale that kind of brand. So I was looking specifically for e-commerce businesses because that was my expertise. I was looking specifically for mostly direct to consumer distribution. I was okay with some wholesale. I was very particular about not wanting to have Amazon presence just yet because I wanted to sort of be able to dictate those the way I saw fit when a rebrand was done, when the product felt really right. And then I think the other thing was I needed this product to resonate with me. I needed to feel that I could really co-sign on the sale of that thing, right? I needed to feel like, yes, I believe that product has that price value and I think I can sell it. And what I did was I set up alerts that would just send me an email when a new business with generally that criteria came on the market. And then I would reach out to the broker and say, can I see the financials? And then take a deeper look at the financials. I have previously was the VP of e-commerce at Tibby where I ran the P&L. So I was very close to that process. And in looking at the numbers, there were a couple of other businesses I looked at. One was in the CPG space where we looked at the financials and it didn't feel right. Didn't feel like there was enough profitability there. It looked like they had probably already reached the ceiling from a top line revenue perspective. And so it didn't feel right. But I would say that narrowing down that initial criteria was very helpful in sort of getting me to the finish line much faster, right? Because I could very easily say, this one doesn't check all 10 of the boxes, so we're going to pass. And I was okay passing because, again, generally speaking, I'm not very financially risky. So I wasn't going to take a risk on the sort of broad strokes of what the business looked like.
That's fascinating. I love that you mentioned that CPG brand in particular. And, certainly we won't
Yes.
mention any names here.
Yes.
And I would imagine there's some degree of
Yes.
NDA that'll be in
Yes.
place there
Yes.
anyways.
Yes.
But I'd love to pick your brain on some
Yeah.
of those red flags that stood out to you. You mentioned top line, so revenue numbers, something it sounds like in the profit and loss statement that really stood out to you. Could you share a little bit more about what some of those red flags were when you dove into the financials?
Yeah, it was really digging deep into some of those expenses and saying, right, because your expenses really break down all the way. There could be something that's like 50% of the expense base, right? And the idea is, can all of these come down a little bit? And in this particular business, there was one piece of the puzzle. The product happened to be very heavy, and it's not something that part of the product makeup was never going to change. And shipping, as we know, is a very, very expensive thing to do. So I thought about when we scale this business internationally, when we're talking about shipping across US borders, what is this going to look like? This number is just going to keep growing, not just as a number, but as a percentage of the total. And that was what I couldn't wrap my mind around. In this shipping world where there's not a ton of options, right? There's a little bit of a monopoly there between the couple of guys that you can go to, right? There aren't the small mom and pop shipping carriers that will offer you a great rate. You're either with UPS or DHL or FedEx, and they're all astronomical. And so this was a line item in the P&L that I really couldn't get over. And just felt like I want to be able to feel like I can make an impact on all of these expense line items, as well as the top line revenue, of course. But if we can make even an incremental impact on all line items, then we can make this business more profitable, right? And so I didn't feel comfortable with that particular business for that reason.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So, this might be a challenging question to throw your way, but we'll try it. Let's say you had a chance to coach that CPG brand and offer them guidance on how they could go about making themselves a better acquisition target.
Is there any feedback that you could give to that brand? Because to your point, there's not a
There's
lot of
not a
levers you can
ton.
pull on
Yeah.
shipping.
Yeah.
Is there any coaching that you would give them where you'd say, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you'd be a way better acquisition target. I would have been much more likely in that state, call it a year
Yeah.
and a quarter ago, to actually make an offer at that stage?
Yeah. Listen, I think that is a hard question to answer because I think that the nature of the product would have to change, right? I think that, I guess I'll say this, and I'm not going to name the brand, but it was a non-alcoholic wine brand. And they were very, very sort of stuck on the idea that it had to ship in glass, right? And glass is expensive. There's a lot of beverage brands now moving away from that, moving to alternate packaging means to cut down the shipping costs. But I think that particular brand was very sort of stuck on the idea that we are providing a non-alcoholic experience to somebody who maybe has previously drank alcohol and it wants the experience of the wine in the glass wine bottle. And so I think if I had to give them some advice at an earlier stage, I would say, well, think that through. Is that really important? Is that really a sticking point for you to create this product? And if not, think of alternate materials potentially. But I think at this point in the conversation where they were trying to sell, it's probably something they realized themselves and were ultimately. And so that's kind of what you're trying to do when you're looking for these businesses, right? It's like, is there something glaring where you can say, oh man, this guy's trying to offload this because it's not turnaroundable? And that, I know that's not a word, but like it is not something that even the best e-commerce leader out there could turn around. And so that felt a little red flaggy to me. Does that make sense? Whereas when I saw the Azaria's books, for me, it was a classic. This original founder just didn't have the expertise. This is not the world that she's from. And to no fault of her own. In fact, what a brave thing to do to go out and create a brand when you don't have the expertise. You just had an idea. And how amazing is it that despite not having all that expertise, it was this successful? And so in peeling back the layers of those expenses, it became very clear, even what the one plan would look like. We got to cut that. It's not driving any revenue. We got to cut that. Every line item was looked at for its sort of individual profitability. How much is going in and what is coming out? And does that make sense?
Wow, that's fascinating. So I'm curious, in the process, were there any other brands that you got really deep into the financials of? Because I'd love to, again, for listeners that might be in this position where they're looking to sell, I'd love to see if there are some other insights building upon what you shared there that we can share with them to say, hey, if you're looking to sell, here's some potential red flags that you should really think about. Or if your business is in this stage, here's something you really need to think about trying to do in terms of shoring up your balance sheet.
Yeah, I did look at a bunch of businesses, e-commerce specific businesses, where the assortment felt too wide. It felt like they were trying to be everything to everyone. And that felt like a road I didn't want to go down because when your business is so stretched thin, right? You've got 1% coming from there and 1% coming from, and those are two different things. Those two different end uses. It becomes really hard to tailor down the assortment to what really makes sense for you as a brand in the niche that you're trying to serve, you know? And so for me, the product assortment was really important. And that's also partially because I come from the buying and planning world. That's where I started my career in fashion as a buyer. And so I was very in tune with sort of what the assortment should look like. I didn't want hundreds and hundreds of SKUs because what that meant was on day one, I would have to mark half of them down, right? And that's not, from a brand perspective, that's not what you want to do your first day. So I wanted a tight assortment. I wanted an assortment that made sense, that wasn't sort of, again, trying to do something, a product that is trying to fill a need for everyone, right? We're trying to just streamline what it is that we're trying to offer the market. So that was really important to me. And I think that's an important thing to think through is, do you align with where this product, the white space that this product fills in the market? Do you agree with that? And then just making sure it's not too wide and chaotic. because that's a lot of stuff to clean up at the product level, right? You don't want to have to clean up the product. You want to buy something where, by and large, you have a best-selling product. You just need to fix the rest of the business, right? And the rest of the business, part of it could be solving some issues in the product, right? You might see that, hey, our bestseller could be even better if we made it a slightly darker shade, or if we improved this particular zipper, right? But those are small hurdles versus like, I need to wipe this assortment clean and start from scratch.
If you're terrified about what AI means for how customers find you online, I have some good news for you. SEO, Meta ads, and Google ads are still going to drive the lion's share of your customers in 5 years. But these platforms are evolving. We help e-commerce brands grow and future-proof their methods of gaining new customers. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show. That's fascinating. So part of what I'm hearing there is if you're running a brand that has a few hundred or even a few thousand SKUs and you're looking to go through that acquisition, one thing that could be really beneficial to you is figure out, which of those products are making up a really small percentage of overall sales. If they're not directly in line with what your main customer demographic is looking to buy, consider phasing out those products, consider selling off that inventory, building up cash flow.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating perspective. I love that.
Absolutely. And even I had to do that, right? Like when I bought the brand, we had, less than 100 SKUs total. And I was really lucky in that I come from this buying and assorting world. So I was able to run sell-through analyses and see, what are these things are just really dogs at the end of the day and that we need to get rid of. And so one of the first promotions that we ran when I came on board was to create a sales section where we were just exiting some of the things that there were a couple of criteria. One, I didn't align with them, right? I didn't think that this was the direction for the brand. Two, it was something that was just not selling. And a lot of time for obvious reason, right? Like not in the color scheme that spoke to the brand, just didn't have that aesthetic appeal that AZARIA was going for. And then anything that I thought that could, from a quality perspective, not align with what we were trying to build, right? Like things that had an extremely high return rate, and trying to figure that out and fix it. The juice wasn't worth the squeeze. The sales weren't there to begin with, and it was just getting returned. Like something like that was like, okay, easy, let's exit this. So I think with any sort of e-commerce brand, if you're selling a product, there will be that moment in the beginning where you're thinking through that. Does this assortment make sense for where I'm trying to go?
I want to jump ahead and then we'll jump back to the
Yeah.
acquisition piece
Yes.
and like some of the logistics that went into the acquisition. But I want to jump ahead. Brand has been acquired. You've signed the dotted line day one as the new owner of AZARIA. You mentioned a big part of the due diligence process was looking through the financials, figuring out
Yeah.
what are some areas that you knew, hey, I know I can make things
Yeah.
operate more cleanly. I know I
Yeah.
can be a little bit more profitable here.
Yeah.
What were some of those big items that stood out to you that you really focused on, let's say like first 30, 60, 90 days in terms of
Yeah.
improving profitability, whether it's lowering expenses, boosting revenue?
Yeah, I can give you some examples. So when you acquire a brand, you acquire it as is, right? So you're acquiring the talent, the headcount, the people that are working for the original founder. You're acquiring the full tech stack. You acquire all the product. And so for me, I went through it very methodically. It was straight down the P&L to see where can we make changes. And everything was on the chopping block, probably apart from the platform that we were on, Shopify. Wasn't ready to make that kind of move. Everything else, every other tech partner, everything was on the chopping block potentially. And with that in mind, I was able to say, okay, if you came in here and we're looking at this business, what doesn't make sense? And I'll give you an example of something that didn't make sense. So they were running an influencer program. They were effectively giving away product and just crossing their fingers that influencers would post or tag AZARIA. And when I ran the numbers on the program, we were bleeding cash in inventory, right? But inventory is cash, right? Inventory is potential revenue. So we were just pushing, and influencers would come to us, and we would generally have a very open door policy about the influencer and about their follower count and metrics. And we would say, okay, you're an influencer, you want to work with us, what would you like? And then we would send them a bag free of charge, right? So at no cost to them, no shipping, nothing. And we would just hope for the best. And when we saw what that program was running, which was honestly just not a lot, I had to say, absolutely not. We have to stop this today. No way can this go forward. And so I remember there being actually a day where, I have Shopify hooked up to my phone, so I get a ping every time we have a sale or an order come through. And I just saw this maybe 10, 15 $0 orders coming through. And I reached out to the team. I was like, what is happening here? Are we giving away a product? And they're like, oh, this is our influencer program. This is what's happening. I mean, this was probably like day 3 or 4. And I was like, stop, everybody, stop what you're doing. This is not, let me run the numbers on this before we do any more of this. And so we pared back the program. Now you have to be accepted to the program. We have to vet your metrics. We have to know that you have a decent following count. And if you don't have a decent following count, your followers are really engaged with you. They have a high conversion rate on things that you talk about. And even then, it's still 50% of the retail value, and we charge you shipping. Because guess what? It could get to your door and you could decide there's 100 other things at your door that you are going to post about and not this bag. And then I'm just out of luck, So I had to make the program profitable just very soon after I started. So that was one thing. And I think most leaders know this. It's hard to navigate the people of it all, right? I inherited lots of really great human beings that I think ultimately were not right for the brand. And so having to cut headcount because it didn't make sense. And because here I was, the new owner who had experience, right? It was very different than the previous phase of the business where that founder was she was trusting the team to get the things done. There was not a ton of oversight, and not because she didn't want there to be oversight. It was because she didn't have this experience that I have, right? And so I was able to come in and say, that job you're doing, I can automate that. I can automate that in 5 minutes. So I don't need that headcount. And so really trying to figure out where I do need people, and I do need really great people. I brought some people on from my past lives. So that was a change that was made. We switched over our marketing agencies pretty soon after I started because I was not happy with the ROAS that was being generated by that previous marketing agency. I had seen better results with some folks that I'd worked with in my past. And I said, right out of the gate, that needs to change. We can't keep bleeding cash in digital marketing or social media spend. And so that was a pretty soon after we acquired Move. Yeah, there was a lot of things. And there still are things. There's still days where I think through, like, does this tech partner make sense? Is this reviews app that we're using, is it the best one? Or could there be one that's maybe more cost effective and drives better results? So I'm doing that due diligence sort of every day. And I think that it's an important thing to do all the time, because to get out of the sort of just the 4 walls that you're in and say, could we be doing this better?
I hope that listeners go back and maybe re-listen to the last 5 minutes that you just shared right there, because no matter what stage your business is at, there's so
Yes.
much gold in there that
Yeah.
people can take away and say, okay, I'm not planning on even selling my business in the next
Yes.
5 years. But if our profitability or our profit margins are a little bit lower than we'd like to see, why don't we go through that same exercise?
Yes,
Why don't we look at some
totally.
of these things that Mira looked at? It's a great way to boost your profits, even if it's only by a couple percentage points. I mean, think of what you can do if you're 2% more profitable as a business. That's massive. That's game changing if you can do that.
Absolutely. And it's really easy to get stuck in my business runs on autopilot and I'm okay with that. It's easy to get stuck in that place. But I think the key is to continue to be curious and to know that this digital e-commerce world is moving at lightning speed. And if you think that there might be something better out there, there probably is. There probably is a solution for that thing. At least do the due diligence of going to look for it.
So on the acquisition piece, because I want to pick your brain
Yes.
on the transition of going from like corporate world to
Yes.
business owner, but First, I did want to just jump back to the acquisition piece.
Yes.
Can you give us just a high level overview of what are like some of the big stages? Let's say I'm
Yeah.
looking to sell my business or I'm looking to buy a business. What are those kind of distinct stages that I should really
Yeah.
expect to go through before that acquisition is complete?
Yes, absolutely. So there's this sort of casual looking phase, right? Where you're trying to identify that criteria, that list that I was talking about initially. And I think that there's a point when it gets more serious, when you're then sort of partnered up with the brokers. You're really doing the due diligence on the numbers. You're potentially even meeting the founder of the company and seeing if this is something you want to put an offer on and move forward more seriously on. And then there is the thinking through, and I'd say some of this is happening in parallel, right? The thinking through the funding piece of it. Am I going to get a loan? Do I have a stockpile of cash? How am I going to fund this business? Again, some of that has to happen on a parallel path for you to figure out what kind of business you can afford, right? Is it in the double digit millions, or are we talking about a much smaller business because of what you can afford, right? And I think when I discovered the idea of ROBs and being able to use some of my money in my 401k, it opened the door to the idea of a little bit bigger brand, a little bit more of an established brand, which made me feel really excited about the process. And I will say, once I did some digging, there are some financial institutions that can help you through the process. I don't know if I would say it's not easy. There are just a lot of things to consider in the way that the money moves from your 401k account into another account to then fund the business. So I was lucky enough to find a financial institution called Guidant Financial, who helped me through the process from beginning to end. They said, okay, this is when you have to do this. This is when you have to do that. I actually had to leave my place of employment to be untethered from the 401k funds that I had from that job. So it was a necessity for the acquisition to be able to leave, because at one point I thought maybe I'll stay and kind of try to do both for a little while. But they guided me through all of those requirements and through the timeline, through the moving of the money. And that was so, so helpful. I don't think I'd be able to do it on my own. So I would say if there are people out there that are comfortable with that, looking up the requirements of doing something like this. Again, I am quite financially safe. And so I would rather somebody hold my hand through that process than be left to the wolves. So I used Guidant Financial, and that was really great. I will say one thing about this particular process of funding a small business or startup is that there are rules and regulations that you need to follow once you are incorporated, once you're a brand operating under this kind of acquisition. You have to follow regulations to be, what is it called?
Compliant?
Yes, to be compliant. Yes, correct. Thank you for giving me the word, to be compliant. And there are some people that use the 401k, Rob's rollover, and then get into the running of the business and say, this is actually not for me. And then you can transition out of it. There are ways to transition out of it. You have to buy out the 401k ownership piece of the business, but there are many people that do that. So it might just be a way for you to acquire the business and then eventually move away, or it may be something that really works for you. So I would encourage people looking for a business to look into alternate ways, because you don't just have to have a stockpile of cash to acquire a business.
Amazon is the ultimate double-edged sword when it comes to generating sales. It's an incredible source of revenue for e-com brands, but become too successful and you risk Amazon creating the Amazon Basics version of your product and taking away all your sales. We see it happen all the time, and that's why we help businesses to build a second customer acquisition machine before they lose their Amazon sales. Interested in hearing more? Reach out to us at intergrowth.com/CGS to book a complimentary strategy session with our team. Once again, that's intergrowth.com/CGS. All right, back to the show.
And I'm so glad, because I think it was the first discussion that we had that you were talking about the ROBS rollover. And going into it, I was thinking, how do you go from being at a corporate job to being able to fund this entire business acquisition? But that makes so much more sense that you can use part of your 401k for that. And it's a brilliant approach to take.
Exactly. And it made the again, the process feels so much more palatable. It made it feel like, okay, I can do this, I can afford this. I can afford a bigger brand than I think that I initially had thought about if I was just thinking about using my savings. And that gave me even more comfort in I have the expertise. Now this is a well-established brand. Like the sky's the limit here. And so, yeah. And then there's part of it that's just taking a leap of faith. It's just deciding to not be so conservative with with the way that I see my finances and think bigger in terms of potential upside. I grew up in a sort of a route that you were supposed to take. You're supposed to go to a good school. You're supposed to graduate with a good major. You're supposed to get a good job. You're supposed to climb the ranks, keep your head down, that kind of thing. And I wanted to try to think outside of that for more than one reason. I wanted to be able to do that for myself. And then I also wanted 2 young kids. I want to be able to show them that there's not just one path. You can chart your own path. There's different routes to success, and you get to decide what that is for you. And so that was important to me.
The last segment I'd really love to pick your brain on today, and I think this is a perfect segue, talking
Yeah.
about charting your own path.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little about the transition from 17 years corporate fashion to running your own business. We'll start out on the optimistic side. What
Yeah.
were some of the best things
Yeah.
about making that transition? What have you loved about the process in
Yeah.
the past year?
Yeah, absolutely. I think hands down, the best thing about making this transition is having that control back of my own time. Again, I have 2 young kids. I have a daughter who's turning 6 and a son who just turned 2. And I was becoming so acutely aware in my corporate job that they were getting older and I didn't get this time back. And that there were so many hours of the day that I was missing with them, and I just couldn't wrap my head around that anymore, and it felt ironic to me that despite sort of ascending the ranks of this corporate world, there was still this firm sort of space time culture and the need to just be in your seat and be there, and the lack of flexibility around your time, being able to go to doctor's appointments and do pickups and things like that. Ultimately, I felt was really important to me and that I wanted to prioritize. And that is absolutely, I have my time back. I get to decide when I want to heads down, tunnel vision on the work. And they say you work a certain number of hours a day, regardless of when those hours are. So I can get up early and do my work before they're up. I typically sign back on after they've gone to bed, and I'm not resentful about it anymore because I did get to do the pickup and I got to take them to ice cream after. And I didn't feel in that day like I was missing those moments, and I think I think women maybe experience this more than men, but maybe not. I think that those finite years that you don't want to miss, but I didn't want to stay at home and twiddle my thumbs. Like that's not what I wanted to be productive. I wanted to use my expertise for good. I wanted to challenge myself still. I wanted to continue to work hard. But I wanted to be able to do it on my own terms. I wanted to take back control of my time. And that's absolutely, hands down, the best part of this transition.
I can relate in terms of ever since my son was born, I care so much more about work-life balance than I ever have before. I think as a business owner, you're always going to work probably more hours, but having that flexibility to dictate to a large degree when those hours happen.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Talk to me about some of the challenges that have blindsided you in the past year, switching from the corporate world to running your own business.
Yeah, I think we talked about this once, but sort of the housekeeping of running a business is not, I will say, not my favorite and also not my strong suit. It's the taxes of it all, the bookkeeping of it all, that stuff that needs to get done. It needs to get done. And a lot of times it requires not a ton of brain power, right? It's just sort of getting it done is not what I enjoy. And I had the luxury, I think you don't think about that when you're in a corporate job because somebody else is taking care of it. And you almost forget it exists And you're so acutely aware when you are running a small business that it exists. So that's one of the downsides, is that you got to, but I think largely you just have to see it as you got to take the good with the bad, right? There's so many upsides of doing this. I get to be creative every day. I get to think of different ways to scale every day. I get to about new ideas for content, new ideas for product. All of that is worth having to do a little bit of bookkeeping. But I'll say it's not my favorite. You'll see it on my to-do list, and then it remains the thing on the to-do list while everything else gets crossed off. Yeah, let's just say I need to make sure my books are tidy for last month. And it's the end of this month. So that gives you a little bit of a picture of how much I love it. But again, you take the good with the bad, and there's so many ways to help. If I said I didn't want to do bookkeeping at all, I could outsource that. If I said I didn't want to deal with anything having to do with taxes at all, I could outsource that. And I would suggest, if it's something that is so out of your wheelhouse that feels overwhelming to you, just outsource it. There are ways to outsource it. Just outsource it, take it off your plate so you can focus on the other things. I think I'm just at a phase right now that I have the time. I want to be lean. I want to learn to do all the things, so that when I do pass it off, I have an understanding, right? So that I'm not running blind about what this thing I'm passing off is. And that's everything from bookkeeping to managing my socials to the product development of it. I really want to learn it so I can pass it off in the right way. And then when I have a relationship with somebody who's doing it and doing it well, I can give feedback. It's not just like, okay, you take this thing and you run wild with it. It's, I did this once, so we can have an intelligent conversation about how to do this better. That makes sense.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And I've largely taken the same mindset, probably at times to a fault, where
Yeah.
my mindset has generally been like, okay, for me to hand off any sort of responsibility, I need to have at least like a pretty good baseline understanding of how to do this thing.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
right now, we're recording a podcast episode on Riverside. And I think it was I would guess probably the first 3 episodes that we released for this podcast. I was the one doing all the editing, and it was not efficient. Norson, our editor, is way better at it than I am. But I was like, I need to understand like at least the rudimentary edits on Riverside. I need to understand like what goes into that process.
Yeah.
One of the benefits I find is if you learn how to do those things before you hire an expert for it, it gives you a ton of peace of mind when you're going through the vetting and hiring process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And it feels like a hard hill to climb in the beginning, but once you do get that understanding of it, it really is an aha moment. And then you can also really identify who can do it better, right? You're just like, I know how to do this, and I know I don't like it. So I know what type of person I need to find that's going to love to do this thing and going to do it well.
Mira, this has been amazing today. For anyone who wants to find AZARIA products, where can they go to buy you guys online?
Absolutely. You can find us at www.azaria.com, and we are AZARIA brand on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. So you can find us there as well. We are, for the most part, it's a 99.9% direct to consumer. So you really have to just buy the product on the website. We don't have any Amazon distribution yet. We are at some small specialty stores around the country. A few, I would say 4 specialty stores around the country. A small subset of our product is there. But by and large, we are direct to consumer at azaria.com. Come and check us out. We are more than just diaper bags. I think I want to, that's the direction that I really want to take this brand in, is we are known for our diaper bags. And I love that so much. We will never walk away from that product. We will never alienate that customer. But I want, that person who is in the market for a good bag to know that we are quality handbags for every stage of a woman's life.
Brilliant. And listeners, check out the show notes. We'll share all of AZARIA's socials, website, you name it. We'll share the spelling for the Rob's Rollover as well, so you can look into that. Rob's is an acronym, which I have it in my notes. So Rob's Rollover for business startups. So check it out, listeners. It's a brilliant way to fund an acquisition. Once again, listeners, Mira Nair, the CEO and owner over at AZARIA. Mira, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Pat, for having me. This was a delightful conversation. You are a wealth of knowledge. I'm so happy to be here to chat with you today.
Thanks for tuning in to Customer Growth Sessions. If you found it helpful, subscribe and give us a review. It helps us to grow the show. Looking for more SEO guidance on how to grow your business? Contact us at intergrowth.com/estimator or email me directly. You can reach me at pat@intergrowth.com. That's all for today. We'll see you again soon.